Hi, Jan. Welcome. Thank you for putting on an information session here for NBIS. And Jan has been a practicing clinician for 25 years. She got her master's in counseling of psychology, and she runs our Caregiver Group Sessions here at NBIS. Those happen throughout the year, and we'll mark it out when those happen. So currently we have one going on here in the fall, and Jan will be presenting some information. So I'll give it to her.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan, for the intro. So yeah, I've been doing this for a bit. I used to work with brain injuries a couple decades ago. I've been around for a while, so I'm happy to share a little bit of knowledge. So I've put together a bit of a slideshow, and we have some videos as well. So I'm just going to sort of give you an opportunity to sort of think about, sit back, relax, and just sort of taking in this information as best you can. But what's nice about this is that you can go back over it again if there's something that really stuck out for you, and you can rewatch it. So this is why I love doing these recorded sessions. So recognizing that caregiving for someone with a brain injury requires a lot of patience, right? We have to have a lot of understanding. We have to have a lot of practical skills. And so this is really, the idea of this was to help you to understand and to realize that some of what you're going through is completely normal and okay, right? All right, so in this session, we're going to be going over what the role is of a caregiver, sort of what to expect, the relationships that you have. There's a lot of myths and facts myths around caregiving out there. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about warning signs of caregiver burnout. And then what can we do to help ourselves prevent ourselves from becoming burnt out? And then what are some resources for you that you can access on your own, even beyond our support group? Okay. So what is the role of a caregiver? Well, basically, right, you are providing the physical, the emotional, and logistical, literally, right, support for your loved one, right? And who knows what this is, right? It could be, a whole variety of different things, managing their meds, taking them to appointments, right? And you're going to have to learn how to adapt to the ongoing uncertainty. Sometimes the brain injuries will get better, sometimes they'll get worse, sometimes they'll stay stagnant, but there's always something, right? And so you kind of have to be very adaptable, right? And there's a lot of times where you end up having to advocate for your loved one, right? And so this may be a new role for people. And so I thought it might be nice to hear from someone else who's actually experienced this. And I'm going to start it from a certain point. So just a second here while I get to the 55 seconds, because it makes a difference.
Life, he's relearning it.
Okay, so here we go.
What are the biggest challenges for caregivers when their loved ones first come home?
Not having the support of others accessible all the time. There is a great comfort being in a hospital. I know that sounds strange, but knowing that everything wasn't riding on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. I think the hardest challenge when you first come home is knowing that how much is riding on you and that there aren't other members of a staff around to call on.
What happens when what had been an equal marriage relationship suddenly becomes much less than equal?
That is one of the hardest things. Sometimes it's hard, and I find myself sometimes being resentful. Mm-hmm. I hate to admit that.
Being human?
I hate to admit that, but it's the reality of it, that sometimes it's very frustrating to know that I gave up school, I gave up work, I've lost a lot of my friends, and I have to give myself a reality check a lot of times and remind myself that he was in the military when I married him, and I knew that getting injured was a possibility. And like Carolyn was saying, remembering that my job now is helping him, and it is rewarding because he gets better every day.
How would you advise caregivers to cope with the changes to their relationships and to family dynamics?
Remembering to take care of yourself, which is easier said than done. People would tell me that all the time, and I would get angry because I wasn't neglecting myself by choice. I was neglecting myself because I had no other option. Sometimes it means that the family member that you're caring for has to make some accommodations for you. I've sat around and waited for Ted at many an appointment, and I decided a while ago that an hour out of every single day would be for me.
Mhm.
Sometimes that meant that I wasn't running to Subway at Walter Reed and eating while walking down the hallway. Sometimes it meant that I actually sat down for 30 minutes and ate my meal. But one of the things that I also did was I would go to the gym and Ted would have to sit on the exercise bike next to me because he was just going to have to wait on me for an hour. And, you know, I think it's important to remember that there is a give and take.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, so who may or may not relate to that? Some may not be, their partner may not be the one who has a brain injury. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a really good friend, right? And and some may not be getting better, some may be getting worse every day, kind of thing, or just stagnant. But I think it's important to sort of recognize a lot of those feelings are the same. So what she experienced, how there was lots of support in the hospital initially. And then when you come home, there's kind of like there's no more support. You're on your own. You are it. And so that can be a little scary. And then also recognizing that, once you get into it, some of the friends sort of disappear. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, right? And the relationship changes. And I think that's an important piece around understanding what it's when it's like when you're caring for a loved one. Okay. And because the relationship does change. And so how do you basically maintain parts of yourself while in this new role? Okay. So when we look at, understanding how difficult it can be caring for a family member or a loved one, we have to also understand that we may be holding down a full-time job or we're struggling to maintain employment. You may be dealing with a health condition yourself, or you may end up ignoring your own health because of the stress and demands of caregiving. And like she said, it's not through choice. It's really oftentimes through necessity during periods of time, right? You may also have other caregiving responsibilities. Some will have children. Some may even have aging parents, okay, that you are trying to navigate and support all while this new role of caregiving for a loved one, okay? So what are some expectations that you may experience as a caregiver? And she mentioned quite a few. But that emotional impact can be huge. There can be some guilt. There can be frustration, anger, resentment, as she said, sadness, right? And feelings of helplessness. There also is a physical impact. We can become fatigued. Our sleep is disruptive. We can have headaches and stress, right? We don't have time to do our own exercise. And so we find that we may be frustrated and not feeling as fit or as healthy as we used to. There's also a social impact. We can start to feel some isolation, some loneliness. We often end up having way less time for family and friends. And so our family members who we were spending more time with now all of a sudden can have mixed feelings about you spending all this time with someone else or the care, the one who's had the brain injury. There's also a huge financial impact. You've probably had to reduce your work hours, but there's also added expenses that come into play when having to care for someone with a brain injury, right? And then it's important to acknowledge, right? There is a mental health impact. 25 to 35% of caregivers become clinically depressed or anxious. And so it's okay if you're noticing yourself starting to be more anxious about life in general, or you're starting to notice that you're becoming more depressed. And, so if you think about it, 1/3 of caregivers, okay, can become depressed or anxious. So if you're having those feelings, it's pretty normal, right? And the other thing that comes along with all of these is how your world kind of shatters, okay? So you're going along living life and you have these expectations of what life is going to look like with this loved one, right? And then all of a sudden something happens. They have a stroke, they have an injury, they have an accident, something happens, right? And it can kind of shatter that world that you had. So your beliefs about safety, right? You thought you were safe, right? Walking down the street or riding a bike or, driving the car, whatever it is. And some people are just sitting there and they'll have a stroke, okay? So there's also this, this belief in life should be fair, or this just world, right? And it doesn't feel fair or just. And, before you felt like you had some control over it. There was some predictability in the world. I work until I'm 55, 60, 65, whatever, and then we're going to retire, and then we're going to go off, and we're going to do all these things in our retirement, and we have all these expectations. Or we have these expectations for our child. Our child's going to graduate, get a job, do whatever, have a family perhaps. And now things are different, okay? So it challenges all those givens, all those things you planned, all the ways you thought you would be a couple, a parent, or a loved one, right? So this also makes the old ways of being a partner, a parent, or a friend, they may no longer work in the way that they did before, right? So the illness or the brain injury becomes larger than the person. So it actually changes your relationship, right? And it's important to recognize that even strong, loving, and well-adjusted relationships are going to be affected, okay? So it's important to have some grace for yourself and some compassion for yourself that yes, your world has changed and you are going to have a lot of feelings around this, okay? So I've got another video that we'll just share around some of this as well, okay?
As a caregiver, I was told in maybe the first 3 weeks after TC was assaulted, I was able to call Lee Woodruff, whose husband Bob had sustained a major brain injury while reporting in Iraq. And she said, "Oh, Abby, just wait till you see what happens to your brain." And I really didn't know what she was talking about at that point. And then a few months later, I'm noticing, oh my gosh, why can't I remember anything? Why is it so hard for me to form a sentence sometimes? And it started to feel like TC's injury really was contagious. Watching him struggle with language so much sometimes made it difficult for me to pull my language together, especially because I was also giving care to my 2-year-old who was learning how to speak at the time too. So I was hearing a lot of like disjointed language during the day, which made it really difficult for me to speak. And beyond that, as a caregiver in those early days, you're just inundated with so many things that are completely out of your realm of knowledge, and just trying to organize everything in your life in order to keep it together, it's extremely overwhelming. And I think at some point our brains are just like, enough. We cannot take this anymore. So I found myself really unable to remember things that like I had just said, like maybe said to somebody, or something that people had just said to me. I couldn't remember people's names. So I had to keep lists for absolutely everything. I had a calendar that TC and I would both use, where I would write down every single thing we were doing during the day, every transition we were going to make. I would put everything in my Google Calendar, otherwise I would forget it. Like even down to like, please wash your hair tonight, because brain injury really, I mean, it affects the whole family, and it does a number on the caregiver's brain as well.
Okay, so recognizing that if you are experiencing some of those, issues, short-term memory, not remembering things, right? Struggling with all that, it really is the ripple effect. Okay. And when she talks about, oftentimes it's not just the brain that's impacted. I mean, you feel like you got the one with the brain injury at times. It's really about how you also can often co-regulate emotions. So if one is anxious or depressed, the other family member or loved one will also feel it too sometimes, right? And so this is an important understanding that sometimes if your loved one is feeling anxious, you may as well, because what we do and what we, as individuals, as humans, we co-regulate with people. Okay. And it's a way of connecting and feeling connected. And so our emotions will often match. Okay. Or one will have this feeling, let's say really anxious, and the other one will go down here to basically be like numb kind of thing, or the other way around kind of stuff, right? And it's really important to recognize, as we've talked a little bit about, that the dynamic of caregiving shifts a relationship from a partnership or parent to patient. You either become a nurse, you become the caregiver, you do all the other stuff. And so it's now all of a sudden a very different relationship. And often your communication becomes strange. You just don't know what to do or say anymore because, you can't talk in the same way. Oftentimes, those with brain injury need to have it very simple and clear. So there's sometimes they don't understand that abstract. And so how you guys used to communicate with maybe laughter and jokes, they may not actually be able to understand that joke and may take it literally, right? And so that communication will become strained, all right? So it's part of, well, if I say it this way, they're going to get upset. But if I say it that way, they may not understand or they may get hurt. So there's a whole lot of issues that come up all of a sudden with communication. So how you communicated before the brain injury is often very different than how you communicate after, okay? And over time, this can erode that connection, right? And it can also increase the distress for both. And there can also be a lot of fun as well with some of the brain injury in terms of communication. So perhaps what they didn't used to find funny, they now find funny. So there are some wonderful experiences where you can also have a different kind of connection now, right? And when we look at the impact on our family and friends, family can often feel like you're spending too much time and they can feel left out or neglected, right? So often this happens if a child has been impacted by a brain injury and the other siblings now all of a sudden see you spending so much of your time helping out that child. And they can feel that it's unfair because you're not spending as much time with their family and maybe their kids, so your grandkids, because you're having to caregive for your sibling. Or, you're spending more time now with your partner and you're not spending as much time with your kids or your grandkids. And so family can start to feel a little resentful at times, okay? Friends also can feel an impact because you're spending less time with them. But they don't really understand what you are going through. And so they don't really know how to support. The other thing that feels different is that if you were to run into your friends out on the street or just to sort of a quick chat, our loved ones don't look different on the outside. Okay, you can't see the brain injury. And so when you've got someone who has like a broken leg or they're paralyzed or whatever it is, you can actually see the physical shift. And so it's a direct reminder. But when the person doesn't look that much different, they don't see the brain injury because it's on the inside. And so they can assume that the person is the way they used to be. Okay. And so they don't understand all the impacts. And so because they don't understand, we often will find ourselves isolating because it just makes things easier in the short term. But in the long run, it isn't. And this is where we're going to, sorry, I've got a hair there. What we want to really have an opportunity to how do we engage those friends? How do we engage family to support us so that we don't feel so isolated? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we just really want to acknowledge, right? Lots of feelings come up. We can have guilt, anger, fear, hopelessness, overwhelm. We can have joy. We can also have relief, right? There's a relief that, our loved ones made it through. Sometimes we hear from doctors that say, don't expect much. They may not make it or whatever. And all of a sudden, a few months later, they're walking beside you talking, right? And so there can be a lot of relief. There can be a lot of humor as well, So before they used to be able to, let's say, make amazing chocolate chip cookies. And they decided to make some chocolate chip cookies again, but they forgot to put the sugar in. Okay. And so you taste them or whatever you taste them, and it's like, okay, something's not quite right with this. And so you can have some humor in it, right? There can also be some confusion. How do I deal with this? Where do I turn? There can be disappointment with our future expectations, and we can also have grief about the life that we thought we were going to have. So there's lots and lots of feelings that come up as a caregiver throughout the journey. Okay, lots of myths and facts around caregiving, right? So number one, myth number, self-care is selfish. Right? Fact. Taking good care of yourself is not in any way selfish. In fact, the opposite. It's actually easier to take care of others if you've taken care of yourself first. Okay? Myth number two, a happy marriage, family is enough to get through this. Even the strongest relationships need new tools, need support, and need to have boundaries when facing serious illness. Okay? Myth number three, I have to know everything in order to be able to help. You don't have to know everything to be successful as a caregiver. No one knows everything, not even the professionals. All right, myth number four, I have to be strong and hide all my feelings. No, it's not healthy to keep your feelings bottled up. All right, so don't be afraid to share how you're feeling with the person you're caring for or others. Maybe talking to a counselor can be really helpful, right? Maybe there's some things that you're struggling with. Maybe you can't get the image out of your head of what happened or how they were in the hospital. Really important to understand that you need support too. And when we suppress our emotions, it actually increases our stress hormones, which actually weakens our body's immune response. Okay, so it's really important that we do get that support when we do talk to people. And so who better to talk about some of this stuff around caregiving than Mel Robbins? So we're going to have her talking a little bit about the hidden burnout for caregivers. Okay, let's see if we can. Oh, sorry. We'll get this. Here we go.
Caregiver syndrome happens when the responsibilities of caring for someone else, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your parents, the pets, all of it, begins to take a toll on your health, your mood, and your sense of self. I just want to start out by listing some of the most common symptoms of what the medical experts call caregiver syndrome. You're constantly tired, even after you've had a full night's sleep. You have trouble concentrating or staying organized. You're irritable. You're short-tempered because you're fried from taking care of everybody. You feel emotionally numb or detached. You're losing interest in the things you used to enjoy. That one creeps up on you. And next thing you know, you feel like all you do is care for people and you haven't been to your book club in 6 months. You start withdrawing from friends and family or social situations, or you might notice that there's a change in appetite, or you're having trouble sleeping, or the sleep patterns are different, or maybe you're getting sick more often and you keep going, oh, the allergy season is really bad this year. No, maybe it's caregiver syndrome. Maybe you're so worn down that you don't even realize it. You start to feel like your needs don't matter. And here's a big one. You feel guilty when you take any time for yourself. It's important to acknowledge that this is a particular type of stress. And there are 3 reasons why the stress feels so different than any other type of stress. First of all, it's the loneliness. Like you feel like nobody gets it. You're surrounded by people all the time, and yet you feel alone in this responsibility. 27% of caregivers, that's more than 6 million people in the United States, say they feel lonely. That loneliness is linked to an increase in depression and anxiety and even physical health problems. The second reason why caregiver stress is its own unique kind of stress is because the stress doesn't end. It's chronic. I mean, when you're taking care of an aging parent or little children, there's no finish line. And finally, the reason why this stress is so different than other forms of stress you may experience in your life is it's reshaping your relationships, because you're not just a daughter or a partner or a parent anymore. You're the nurse, you're the driver, you're the advocate, you're the assistant, you're the one who has to keep it all together. Look, I see this in your emails. I see that you're isolated. I see that you're exhausted. I see that your relationships are strained. And the thing that bothers me is I also see that you're making yourself wrong over it. That's going to end today.
Okay. So one of the things that Mel's talking about, they call it caregiver syndrome down in the States. We often will call it caregiver burnout here. And it's quite common, right? So just as you heard Mel Robbins say, and it happens even just if you don't even have someone with a brain injury, even if you've just got aging parent or you've got little children, right? So some of the warning signs that I'd like you just to be aware of are a starting of you having a lack of energy, sort of that overwhelming fatigue, okay? Also, sleep problems. You're either getting too much or too little amount of sleep, right? You may notice some changes in your eating habits. Are you gaining weight? Are you losing it, right? You also can start having a feeling of hopelessness or anxiety about the future because you just don't know what it's going to look like, right? And as we talked about, starting to withdraw from or losing interest in activities you once enjoyed, neglecting your own physical and emotional needs. And feeling like caregiving is controlling your life. You may find that you have depression or mood swings. I thought I'd change that to say or mood swings. Anyways, depression or mood swings. Oh, on this slide I did. Becoming unusually impatient, irritable, or argumentative with the person you're caring for and others. Difficulty coping with everyday things. So you heard our other video around how she would need to write everything down because her brain was also forgetting things. And so she was struggling with coping with everything, right? You can also experience headaches, stomach aches, or other physical symptoms. So you can have this lowered resistance to illness. So remember, all these things basically are sort of cumulative, right? If we don't start taking care of ourselves, right? And it can lead to injury or illness or things like that. So then, okay, this all sounds exhausting and depressing in some ways. So how do we prevent burnout? Really, really important to ask for help. No one can do this alone. Give yourself permission to take breaks, okay? Visit with your family, visit with friends, right? Take a long bath, right? Don't skip your own doctor's appointments because you're too busy. Just as that woman said, have your loved one sit and wait for you in the waiting room while you're in having your medical appointment. That's okay, right? Exercise. Eat well. Make a list of daily tasks. Is there something you can delegate to someone else? And this is another important one. Check into family leave benefits from where you're working. You'd be surprised at how many companies and businesses, insurance things will actually have a family leave benefit, which might help take a little bit of that stress off your shoulders around finances. Some people like to get up 15 minutes before anybody else to take that time just for you. Some people like to do it at the end of the day, right? And some people like to do it in the middle of the day. So, how not to lose yourself? Really important. Reach out for help. We can't say that enough, right? Let loved ones know that you may not have the energy to always call or to arrange things, but it doesn't mean you're not thinking of them. Maybe it's time to arrange a monthly date with someone, with a friend, and find an alternate caregiver to come in while you're out. One of the things that we've looked at in the past is sometimes our loved one doesn't like to have, it's kind of be anxious, and you're anxious as well. So for sometimes you may not even want to have someone else come in. So one of the things that we've looked at is if your loved one has a really good friend, let's say, okay, and you think that they would be able to come over and have like a 10-15 minute visit. We want to keep them short to start with, right? Because it's exhausting and tiring for our loved one with a brain injury. And you stay in the house, right? So maybe for a month, they come once a week or they come once every other week and they spend 10 or 15 minutes visiting with our loved one with the brain injury, okay? The next month, maybe they come in for half an hour. You still stay, but you're off doing other things. So you're in the home, okay? Then the next month, maybe they come in for 45 minutes, okay? And then maybe this is an opportunity for you while they're there because your loved one and the friend have now started to get a routine and get to know each other a little bit more. Maybe you go out and you go walk around the block. So you're gone for like 10 or 15 minutes, right? You just get out of the house, walk for 10, 15 minutes. And then maybe the next month, the loved one, the friend, can come for maybe an hour. And maybe you actually can go to a coffee shop, or maybe you go to the bank, or maybe you go and do groceries, do whatever it is, but you now have an hour on your own once or twice a month. And so we have to gradually work up to this, right? But it's really important, not only for you, but also for that loved one to have that connection with a friend, right? And to have someone else that they can kind of rely on and talk to and engage with, okay? So oftentimes, our friends don't know how to help. So this is one example, is if there is someone that you think would be okay to do this, then maybe we start having them come over. Or maybe you say, you know what, it would be really helpful if you just came over and visited. I'm going to be in the kitchen doing whatever, but can you just come over while, and occupy them? Or maybe bringing a ready-made meal is helpful, right? The other thing that people have found really helpful is setting aside a space in your house just for you. And even if that means like those screens that you can put up, right? Like those bifold kind of things that you can do. And so it's not actually a room, it can just be a space. That's all yours, right? And that no one else can come in. When you're in there, no one else enters. So that you can have some downtime just on your own, okay? Another really important piece. What about resources? So the family caregivers of BC have phenomenal resources, okay? They have tons and tons. They have groups that you can attend. They have monthly articles and journals and things like that that you can do, you can look at. They're really a wonderful area of support. The Canadian Mental Health Association even has caregiver programs and peer groups, okay? Your Nanaimo Brain Injury Society has YouTube videos for help around caregiving, okay? And education, and this is exactly what this is going on to, right? The Nanaimo Brain Injury also runs every 2 weeks a caregiver support group. So 2 weeks will basically be online, and then 2 weeks later will be in person. So there's 2 opportunities each month to access caregiving support. Or if you only like the online, you get to have it once a month. Or if you only like the in-person, you've got once a month. So you can do twice a month if that works, okay? The other thing that a lot of people don't recognize is that there are helplines, right? So the 211 is a community and social directory. 988 is a mental health crisis support. Great just to talk to. You also have a lot of self-care apps that you can do. Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer, whole variety of them. These are just a few examples. And then in Nanaimo, we actually have a guide that's called Surviving in Nanaimo, okay? And they have tons of programs that you can access, okay, around resources for yourself, maybe even for your loved one, okay? So this is a great resource. The Brain Injury Association of America has a whole caregiver information center. And so tons of resources, again, that you can access, all right? And in that, Carolyn Rochio has a whole series, okay, of caregiver webinars that you can access for free on the Brain Injury Society or Association of America. The other one that I also really like is Headway, which is the Brain Injury Association of the UK. And they have some amazing, amazing resources as well. But bottom line, it's important to recognize you can't do this alone, nor should you, okay? There are supports out there, and just by accessing them, it actually makes life just a little bit easier, even if you do it once every few months. Just being able to access that support is huge. And to know it's there, you don't feel quite so alone.